I really love what we have lined up for you today. We bring all of the stories you've been hearing coming out of India when it comes to Hedera. We bring all those together and it paints a really impressive picture. We also have some news on the ETF front that could impact the HBAR market. Hedera is presenting at the Swift conference over in Germany, and there's some additional forever mints that are joining the Dead Pixels, and we got a lot more for you as well. Welcome back. I'm Brandon, the HBAR Bull, here once again to bring you the latest in the Hedera ecosystem. But as always, none of this is financial advice. Use it for entertainment or educational purposes only. So to kick this off, I want to talk about what's happening in ETFs and what we heard a little bit earlier this week. One of the two entities pursuing an HBAR-backed ETF, Canary Capital, has filed for a US crypto ETF. As one of our community members, Tata, indicated, and the filing supports, the index that the ETF will track hasn't been established yet, but I would say that HBAR has a really good chance of making it in. HBAR is the number 8 US token according to CoinGecko, and obviously, as we've discussed ad nauseum on here, Canary has already filed for an HBAR-backed ETF that's expected to launch this year, and that puts it in a pretty exclusive group of 5 on this list of the top 15 US tokens. And of course, them already having an HBAR ETF means they already have the custody solution worked out, so HBAR being included in this US basketed crypto ETF is an absolute no-brainer. So things like HBAR being in the top 20 overall, a US token with a very professional narrative makes it a perfect fit for these kind of basketed products. And like the rest of the ETF world out there, these basketed products will likely be much more important to the investment landscape compared to individually backed ETFs. Now, this may come as a surprise, but I'm actually not a huge fan of massive marketing spend coming out of the different organizations. I think a lot of that HBAR could be better spent in different incentives like DeFi incentives, staking rewards, of course, and then you let the community shout it from the rooftops because they're actually pretty darn good at it. But I think in the case of these ETFs, including basketed ETFs, it makes a lot of sense to put some marketing spend behind that. Now, I'm not exactly sure what that would look like. Is that giving grants to Canary Capital and Grayscale for them to do marketing? Is that doing direct marketing? Or is there ways to keep the fees down on these different products? Those kind of things I think would go a long way because I think it is a huge opportunity to make sure that HBAR has a really big impact when these US altcoin ETFs start to hit the market. All right, so I am excited about that. I think it could have a huge impact on the potential of an alt season, and I want to make sure that HBAR is involved. But now we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to get into that regional scene. We're going to talk about India with the Hashgraph Group. Today we have Stefan. He is the CEO and co-founder of the Hashgraph Group. We also have in India who is the head of global partnerships, again at the Hashgraph Group. Gentlemen, thanks for hopping on today.
Thanks for having us, Brandon.
Absolutely. Well, it's good to have you guys. I think it's been too long since we've dug into something like this. But Stefan, before we get into the topic of the day, and that's India, I would like to just clarify something because I think there's some confusion in the community out there around the Hashgraph Association, the Hashgraph Group, and their respective roles. Can you just outline that real quick?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's been a journey, Brandon. As you know, it's been, I think, 3 or 4 years now. We initially started as the Hashgraph Association, which is primarily focused on broad adoption, ecosystem development. And that has been the journey we've been going along to be able to achieve that broad adoption globally. However, from a grant-giving organization, we also realized very early that you also need to look at how do you go into the commercialization? How do you focus on sustainable business over a long-term period? And that's when we established the Hashgraph Group, early 2023, that is focused on the commercialization of Hedera-powered solutions, but being able to implement as well as make investments in different types of projects. So if I would differentiate between the two organizations, you have THA, the Hashgraph Association, focused on broad adoption, ecosystem development, and working with the community to enable a broader community globally. The Hashgraph Group, on the other hand, is focused on profit making to ensure that we're able to commercialize and sign deals and sign business projects that enterprises may not sign with a non-profit organization. So you really also have a certain liability aspect that is taken into account between the two organizations. And that's how we differentiate between the two. There is no related parties between the two. So THA, for example, has no ownership. THA is a membership organization that allocates grants and achieves broad adoption for Hedera, whereas THG is focused then on the business development and commercialization aspects. And that's how I would differentiate between the two.
That makes perfect sense. And of course, sustainability is critical, and we want these organizations to be able to last for a long time into the future. And of course, we're planning on Hedera being a 100-year organization, so we want all these other organizations to follow suit. So now let's get into the topic for the day in India. Why is the Hashgraph group so focused on the Indian market in particular?
Right. So very early on, from the time we started pretty much around 3.5, 4 years ago, we realized the big potential of India because of various reasons, and not just as from a business perspective, but also from a talent pool perspective. So, for example, India has a huge population and therefore a huge consumer base. So it's a very high volume market, but at the same time, it's also a low transaction value market. So it's basically volume driven. So we thought Hedera, with its very low gas fee and time to finality, is ideally suited for a market like India. India is also, I would say, digital infrastructure ready. The government is investing a huge amount of money on digital infrastructure in the digital economy. For example, in micropayments, they have developed something called the UPI, Unified Payment Interface, which is the largest of its kind in the world. It's something like Venmo, basically, it's a peer-to-peer network where people can pay and it reaches the other person's account instantly, and all the banks are participating in it. And why it's significant is because it is currently running 16 billion transactions a month, and it can be very easily blockchain enabled, for example. So it has all the infrastructure, it has the people, it has a talent pool. Just to give you some context in terms of numbers, the world Web3 revenues or market in 2030 is expected to be something in the region of somewhere between 1.5 to 2 trillion. And India is expected to have at least 5 to 10% of the market share. So we are talking of 100 to 200 billion revenues from Web3 alone in 5 years' time, which is significant. And from a talent pool perspective, last year, India had the highest number of developer adoption and also the highest blockchain adoption among all major economies. So India currently has 12% of the world's total open source Web3 developers, second only to US, which is 19%. And I believe in the future, this percentage is only going to go up, not down. So I would say it's a no-brainer why you should be in India. In fact, if you're not in India, we are not doing something right, I would think.
We certainly have to target that market. Stefan, can you just outline the Hashgraph Group's strategy for India overall?
Yeah, so, over the last 3 years, Brandon, we've been focusing on, let's call it the India story. That's how we've defined our strategic approach on being able to build substance in that local jurisdiction. We've been, on this journey of building substance, which is focused primarily on being the service delivery organization, not only for enterprises or government institutions that we work with within India, but most importantly, to be able to serve other projects globally from India. So we see India as a strategic hub in terms of being our global service delivery organization and being able to benefit from the significant talent in terms of engineering expertise, Web3 developers that are based out of that skills capital of the world. So that is really for us a strategic jurisdiction that we want to operate out of. And of course, that's where we have been investing and spending a lot of time building up our organization from India. It is not only focused on, being able to also serve Asia Pac, which is an important region when it comes to global broad adoption. So we've been able to both build up our local substance within India, but also support projects in the Asia Pac region.
Now, Stefan, there was one use case in particular that caught my eye, and that was the State Carbon Bank project that was signed with, I believe, and I hope I get this right, the government of Maharashtra. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So this has been a project that has been, I'd say, in the works for at least 12 months. It has not been, just simply sitting together and signing something. We've worked on this for over 12 months. We had a number of meetings in person through the trips both an India and I have made to India. And as a result of that 12-month collaboration, we signed a agreement with the government of Maharashtra through MPBCDC, which is a government-owned entity of Maharashtra as well as the governments of India. And that is to build a state carbon bank, the first state carbon bank in India on Hedera. I mean, this is huge. This is fantastic news. And in our view, this is the first step of building up Hedera within that jurisdiction to build a state carbon bank, but then beyond that, expand globally across the different regions. And I'm sure India has a few more points to add to that. But it has been a joint collaboration over a 12-month period that we are now very pleased to have concluded. But now the real work actually starts. We're now in delivery mode.
In India, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah. What I'd like to add is that in terms of timing, the timing is just about right, because in April, and we knew about this from last year around September, when the government first published a notification. So as of April this year, India has come under compliance. The India carbon market has come under compliance. So the government has issued a notification initially to 9 high emission industries, for example, like steel, cement, petroleum, petrochemicals, chlor-alkali, coal-fired power plants. So they now need to meet certain emission targets, and if they're not able to meet those targets, there's heavy penalties. At the same time, if people are exceeding those targets, in other words, people who are generating carbon credits are going to be rewarded. Now, therefore, suddenly overnight, it's opened up a huge demand for carbon credit, which off-takers need to buy, but there is no platform in India at this point. There is no adequate infrastructure to even track carbon, forget monetizing and selling it. So this platform, what it aims to do is that, starting with the government of Maharashtra, because they are the most forward state, and then they're also the number 1 GDP contributor in India and the most industrial state as well. They have taken the lead, but once we build the platform, it's going to be not just pan-India, but global as well. So what I mean by that is, under the Paris Climate Accord, Article 6, they now enable, in fact, encourage countries to basically do cross-border buying and selling of carbon. And what that means from a revenue perspective is, in India, for example, the cost of generating 1 ton of carbon is just $10. And once you scale, it could even come down to $7, $8. Whereas in mature markets such as Japan, EU, it's like $25, $30 or even more. So you can think of the arbitrage opportunity and what India government is going to gain by being able to track, generate and sell those carbon and gaining that kind of income. And our platform, therefore, could become, I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I'm saying this, could potentially become of national importance in terms of supporting India and becoming a global player in the carbon market. And the validation comes from the fact that during this trip, Stefan and I, we spent a lot of time meeting mega corporations, international corporations operating in India, who are generating a lot of carbon in India as well as in other markets, as well as we met with some very senior government executives, not just in Maharashtra, but across India again. And all of these people are interested in joining us in some form or the other, could be as a stakeholder or as an off-taker. So now we have a potential pool of ready clients. We know where to source the carbon credits from. It's a question of putting it all together and bringing it on a Hedera platform. And this is going to be massive. Stefan and I are very, very bullish about this. So you'll see a lot of announcements going forward on this as and when we onboard people.
Well, this is the exact kind of stuff we want to hear. Stefan, are there any other top initiatives and collaborations coming out of the region that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, so I think one of the great things is, when we initially started the journey in India, we had launched the Bharat Blockchain Yatra event, which is across 18 states over an 8-month period. And during that event, we actually had onboarded thousands of users to the platform to be able to become Hedera certified. Now, we've moved beyond that in the sense that we've also had an agreement with the AICTE, which is the education authority in India, where we're able to now have the Hedera training accredited for certified developers. Our goal within India is to be able to certify 50,000 developers over the next 5 years. And this is a commitment we're working very close with the Indian government and various ecosystem partners within India, like NASSCOM is one example of that. So that's one very important initiative, in addition to partnerships, strategic partnerships like the one we signed with KPMG. And in addition, we're also working with the Polyversity. This is an initiative launched by IDS, where we're able to deliver our training and certification programs within this metaverse environment. And we also will be translating that training and certification into about 30 plus international languages to be able to have a broader reach in terms of the types of people that will be able to use and participate in that training.
All right, understood. So in India, what are you working on for the Hashgraph group in the region that you're most excited about?
So Stefan mentioned some of those names. One is the KPMG Alliance is what I'm very excited about, because I believe it could be potentially the most significant, or one of the most significant business alliances within Hedera. So what happened was, early on in January, we signed this partnership agreement with KPMG India. Now, KPMG India is also the global center of excellence for Web3. So what that means in theory is that any KPMG client anywhere in the world, we could potentially have access to through the KPMG India Web3 team, and basically explore building Hedera solutions. So that's what we have started doing. KPMG has already introduced us to some really large enterprise clients of theirs, and we are in active discussions with them. Very soon, in the next 3 or 4 weeks, we are going to go to market with a co-branded product, KPMG and TAG, so digital identity solution, which again is going to have, we believe it should have very high adoption across verticals and across countries. It's not a country specific thing. It'll be a global product. So that is a partnership very excited about. We have to make it work, of course. And then also in the last couple of years, we have made strategic investments. As you know, we now have a fund, but this happened before we started our fund business. This was mostly strategic investments where we believe that it will help in building our programmatic, the ecosystem that we try to build in India. For example, there's this company called Agnex Technologies, which is India's #1 agri-tech and food traceability company. We co-invested into them with Novo Holdings, which is one of the world's largest impact funds. Novo is also the foundation which owns Novo Nordisk, which is one of the world's largest pharma companies. So Novo is helping Agnex scale across the world. They have very good presence in Middle East, Asia Pacific, now getting into North America as well. And their aspiration is to become the world's #1 food traceability company. And all of what Agnex is going to be doing is going to be enabled on the Hedera platform. So there'll be end-to-end supply chain from farm to warehouse to the supermarket to the table. That's the vision. And another investment I would like to talk about is this very interesting Web3 gaming startup called Circle of Games, where we co-invested with Nazara Technologies. Nazara again is India's largest and the only listed gaming company. They have about 130 million users across the world now and growing. One of the co-founders of Circle of Games is the founder of Chingari, which is India's equivalent of TikTok. And it's one of the world's fastest growing community apps. They have about 200 million users. So they have backing of such strong parents, and they're a very good team. And if you go on DAppRadar, you'll see that Circle of Games has been the #1 game on Hedera consistently for the last 1 year now. They've been very quiet, so not many people know about it. And similarly, we have made other investments as well. We have, through our grants, we have financially supported some very large use cases. Cannot talk about all of those right now because some of those are still in the pipeline, but these will all go on stream by the end of the year or next year, early next year.
All right, well, it sounds like we have the potential for a lot of scale coming on. We actually have had Circle of Games on here a couple times in the past, so I'm familiar with them, and they have some great games to offer the market. So, Stefan, to wrap things up here today, what can the Hedera community expect coming out of the region and the Hashgraph group in the months and years to come?
I think what we can expect, Brandon, is a lot of exciting products and a lot of exciting projects, just like the one with the government of Maharashtra, as well as the products that we've been recently launching, like ID Trust. So I think what we'll be seeing over the next couple of months and years is the further development of our presence in India, but most importantly, being able to position Hedera at the forefront of the DLT evolution that's taking place in that jurisdiction. I think one of the key things that we've very much focused on at the moment is building substance within India. That basically means continuing to build up the team so that becomes really the center of excellence and the service delivery organization for all the things that we're doing within the Hedera ecosystem. In addition to that, of course, we're operating with various different partners, so continuing to strengthen those partnerships. And in India, we'll dive into that, in some of the partnerships that we have established. But most importantly, it's a long-term play. This is not a short-term strategic approach. We're in for the long run, and therefore our intention is to build substance in India and then be able to scale globally from that jurisdiction. And we're very much looking forward to being able to serve the Hedera community and be able to provide all the great services that they would like to see from Hedera.
Well covered. And in India, is there anything else you'd like to pass on?
Yeah, apart from partnerships we mentioned, we are also in the process of signing an agreement with NASSCOM, which is India's industry platform and chamber of commerce for the technology industry, which is worth about $300 billion. As you know, for the last 25, 30 years, one of the biggest drivers of India's GDP is technology services. And this partnership is going to give us the ability of, we are going to be hosting our training and certification courses on NASSCOM's portal, the Future Skills Prime, which is a joint initiative that NASSCOM has with the Government of India, Ministry of Electronics and IT. So that's going to give us huge visibility and distribution platform. Apart from that, we should be able to work with them and we'll have access to the events and thought leadership. Also very excited about that.
Well, gentlemen, there has been a lot of questions out there about things that are going on in India. I'm looking forward to everything that comes out of the Hashgraph Association, the Hashgraph Group, and India itself. Thanks for coming on today and explaining it all.
Thank you, Brandon, for having us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I'd be remiss not to talk about something that came out of the U.S. government this week. The Commerce Department came out and said that they're going to be putting economic data on the blockchain using things like Chainlink and the Pith network. And Hedera was not mentioned. I was actually pretty shocked about that because the Hedera consensus service would be perfect for something like this. But this kind of data tracking, as we know, doesn't have a huge impact usually because there's not that much data to put on there. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe there is a lot of data that they're going to be putting on the blockchain, but compared to something like what we're seeing coming out of India with the Carbon Bank, it generally will have less of an impact. Now, the Carbon Bank, on the other hand, of course, you have to spin up those tokens representing the carbon. They can be traded, so that means it's using smart contracts, and they can be traded multiple times, even high frequency trading, before they eventually get expired. That could have a much bigger impact. So I'm really excited about the things that we're seeing coming out of India. So as these different enterprises, entities, and governments first start using these networks to figure out which ones are most fit for purpose for what they want to do, Hedera's not going to be used in every single one. But I think with Hedera's features, it is going to rise to the top. As they say, cream rises to the top. I think that's exactly what's going to happen in the case of Hedera. Now, one of the good showings that we have this week is stuff that's going on over in Germany when it comes to Hedera. Hedera is participating in the Sibos conference in Frankfurt, Germany. For anyone that doesn't know, Sibos is the SWIFT International Banking Operations Seminar. And yes, it's that SWIFT, the company that handles most international currency transfers equaling about $1.25 quadrillion per year. Hedera is showcasing its real-world solutions such as tokenization, instant cross-border payments, real-time treasury management, digital identity, and AI-capable infrastructure underscore Hedera's readiness to operate within the traditional financial systems. I know that Greg, the Chief Business Officer over at the Hedera Foundation, is going to be presenting, and he's a perfect person to get involved in and mix it up with some of these industry leaders. And while we're on the Hedera Foundation, they put out a blog this week talking about the virtues of Hedera DeFi, both for the little guy and for enterprises alike. I don't think it's any surprise that this blog came out the same week as the SWIFT conference. Essentially, it says that it doesn't matter if you're brand new to crypto, a decade-long degen, or an institution managing billions, Hedera fits everyone's needs. With predictable fees, lightning-fast transactions, and no MEV or front-running, anyone can get an institutional-grade experience. DeFi promised open finance for all, but as many of us know, on many networks, that's still a major challenge. There's failed transactions, unpredictable fees, and bots gaming the system make it frustrating, unfair, and in some cases and at some times, it's almost impossible to use other networks. As the blog explains, Hedera's features make it perfect for DeFi. It makes it clear what we've known for a long time. The Hedera network is designed for reliability, fairness, and universal access, giving every user, big or small, the tools to build on and benefit from the financial rails of the future. I also love that they focused on Hedera's potential around micropayments. They said, the result is a system in Hedera where microtransactions finally make economic sense for everyday users, while high-frequency trading remains affordable for institutions. Now, in the blog, they feature a micropayment solution for tipping, and while I do think that there is some potential around that, I think the lowest hanging fruit, and I've talked about this a lot, is for AI agent-to-agent payments, user-to-agent payments, transactional Internet of Things for autonomous vehicles, smart cities, smart homes, things along those lines. And making the HBAR a transactional currency is really important for a few different reasons. Number one, it's a great narrative to talk about, to feature the HBAR. It's also important for demand. Now, we talk about demand for fees and, of course, speculation, but actually having demand for it to be used as a transactional currency is huge, and it drives the demand for those two other things as well. So I think that a lot of resources should be put into making the HBAR economy for some of these additional things beyond DeFi is really important. So I'm excited that that's being featured in the blog for Hedera. Next up, showing that the big boys of crypto are taking notice, Binance put an explainer on Hedera and what makes it special in its academy. Just like what we featured last week with some of the listings, this is another example of organic acceptance of our favorite network. Now we'll go ahead and take another hard left turn, moving over to retail. We're still seeing promising things out of the Hedera NFT scene. The volumes were a bit tempered compared to the huge spike we saw last week for Dead Pixels, but one of their gold ghosts, this beauty, sold for a whopping 120,000 HBAR, or about $28,000. There was still about 3.5 million HBAR in volume for the Dead Pixels over the past week, and the floor for individual ghosts continues to rise. There were also 2 new collections to start forever mints this week, and they saw pretty decent volume. Wild Tigers had about 400,000 HBAR in volume this week, and just PFP Art had about 276,000. Now, my own mint for the Bulbarians that support this channel continue to sell on Kabila. We saw a few more sales this week. Here's some examples of some of the ones I animated for people, and we're down to the last 100 in that mint, and the Queen is still available. She is absolutely one of my favorites. Now, we had a few more Bulbarians sell today. Thank you so much to everybody that's supporting the channel through picking up these NFTs. Now, I want to do all kinds of cool stuff. Of course, we're starting out with those animations. I want to, of course, eventually get to a forever mint, but we have to get a lot more out there. If you guys have any suggestions on how we can get those out there a little bit more quickly so we can get to that point a little bit faster, please let me know. I have a couple ideas for it, but we'll see what comes to fruition. Sticking with retail-facing applications, thanks to Binary Holdings, Smackm is now available on 169 million mobile devices in Indonesia. Of course, Smackm is a fun, simple game with different levels to support different projects, but I want to reiterate that this can get exposure and distribute tokens for any project with a fungible token. If you're interested in a new, innovative way to get your tokens out there, and of course, get on these 169 million mobile devices, I'm sure the Smackm team would love to talk. All right, now let's go ahead and jump into Shark Bites. Shark Bites is actually probably going to change a little bit in the future, and you're going to hear a little bit more about that in a second. But generally, this is going to be Rob talking about his response to what Mance talked about last week. Rob, welcome back. How are things treating you down under?
Hey, Brandon. Yep, another great week. So much going on Project Acacia, plus we had a UseCon presentation by Wes last week. We've got another one coming up on Thursday, which is the normal one for which we prepare. So there's a lot going on, and I love it.
Well, good to hear. So I want to jump into something. Of course, we had an interview with Mance last week where he outlined a bunch of different things, but I know that you share his vision for Lighthouse Council member use cases, and you have been and you're going to continue to be a driving force behind that. And what we mean by these Lighthouse use cases are council member use cases that serve as an example for other people or other enterprises in their industry to kind of show them how it's done. So what was your take on what Mance had to say last week?
Oh, well, it was a fantastic interview. So, kudos to you for the delivery was awesome. It was the things that Mance had to say. Of course, we hear Mance saying this all the time, and over the last, whatever it is, 8 months since the vote for the new council chair, actually 5 months maybe, we've been talking about this a lot, both internally via UseCom and, part of the leadership team on which, I have the honor to sit because of being the chair of UseCom. So this is a narrative which has been, very well kind of promulgated throughout the council, and the council itself is fully behind, this vision. Why wouldn't it be? The founder steps up and wants to course correct into the original vision. It's amazing to hear Mance just lay it out like he did on that interview. There are many things that will become more apparent and revealed over the next few weeks and months. But as a council member and as the chair of UseCom, I like to respond with that hat on rather than re-prosecute everything that Mance said, which I just encourage everyone to go and watch it at least twice. So, which will get your viewing numbers up as well. I actually was attracted originally. I was drawn to Hedera back in 2017 when I first heard about it. I was running the blockchain practice of PwC here, and we were. I'm a payments guy, so I was looking at kind of next generation financial infrastructure, and someone, a good friend who had heard about Hedera while working at one of the big banks in the UK said, you've got to look at this, because none of the blockchains that I had been working on or working with or looking at were fit for purpose in my view back in 2016, 2017. And Hedera was something different. It was a fresher breath air. It was, this was before the governing council was formed, before open access even. So we were just looking at the original services, but actually it made sense to me that was the architecture that would support micropayments and financial services and tokenization of everything. We started talking about that as a core theme for Web3 all those years ago. But there was no real way for it to manifest, and we had to go through 2 or 3 cycles and the maturation of the entire system, as well as Hedera or Hedera Hashgraph, as we called it then. And then I was kind of part of that journey. When the council, when Mance started talking about the council back then, because I was a payments guy and because I know the Visa network very well. That was it's when the light bulb went on for me. Of course, if you want a network which imbues trust because it supports financial services, it supports economic activity, then the point of decentralization is all about trust. And all the blockchains, all the chains of blocks were doing decentralization and trust in a particular way, largely based on fully permissionlessness, which led them to, proofs of work and other consensus mechanisms to try to address that trust issue. And Mance and Lehman came up with an alternate approach, which was very much very familiar to within the enterprise context. So that was my light bulb moment, and then everything else kind of followed. And I was lucky enough to bring FPOS onto the governing council in 2021, and I've done my journeyman stuff, through the foundation and association as well. So, I've seen how the organizations work. When Mance was talking about the journey for Hedera's decentralization, I was kind of getting firsthand experience of both the good and the bad. And when Mance was talking about the recognition that there are problems in that third pillar, that where are the lighthouse projects? Where are what are the council doing in terms of delivering into production, creating economic value for both themselves and for Hedera? They're few and far between. And so, and it's not for want of trying. Enterprise delivery is hard, as I often say, and you need to be lucky. You need to get the right sponsorship, which is often not internally. The council representatives, so they've got to do a lot of stakeholder management internally. I have first-hand experience of how hard that is, especially in an environment where there is a lack of regulatory clarity and the technology is still maturing and right. So there's lots of reasons why these barriers are there. But what Mance was saying was, under his leadership, under the next 2 years of him as chair, we will double down. We will focus on trying to help all of our council members clear those hurdles, both internally for them and externally in terms of coordinating the ecosystem partners to support their delivery. And I'm very, very excited about this next phase. And as the chair of UseCom, the Network Utilization Committee, we see all the use cases, we see the problems, we see all the successes, both those that are public and those that are not public. And I'm very excited about this next phase because I think we have everything lined up now. Hedera 2.0, as we've talked about, where the foundation, THA, Hashgraph, the LLC are all kind of now well aligned with the mission. We now have phase 4 governance, which Mance was talking about, which is the kind of the most recent iteration and refinement of governance for the council, with the committee structures, the board structure, and everything. So, we're supremely well placed now to really double down on getting these lighthouse projects. And, as chair of UseCom, I would be driving for every single council member to have a production project within the next year or so.
Well, we have seen, certainly improvements with the Hedera Foundation. I've seen a lot of things come along, just from the way they present things to things actually coming to market, just movements in general. So we have seen improvements there. I will say that, and I got some questions around this as well, that, why weren't they doing this already? But there was a different focus when we were just establishing this brand new governing council, this brand new thing. It was establishing that governance. Let's see if we can work together and actually have these huge enterprises from around the world, from different industries, actually govern a DLT. So there was a different focus in the first phase. Now that's pretty much been set up. It's been fine-tuned, as you mentioned, over the past year. And now the next thing is, can we actually get everyone using the network and serving as I said, an example for everyone else out there? And I think with the focus, that's exactly what we're going to see. Like Mance also kind of highlighted that, when you see a problem and you put the proper focus on it, you'll be able to address that problem. And it does, having that shift from let's make sure we get governance right to let's make sure we use the network. That makes a big difference, right?
Yeah, and that's consulting 101, right? And what is the problem to be solved? And it's not the fault of the council members. It's not the fault of the ecosystem partners. Everything in the Web3 space has been charging ahead at a really rapid pace, trying to dodge unfriendly regulators or trying to course correct based on different jurisdictional interpretations of how Web3 should evolve. And we're, as a council, largely international organizations. Our representatives aren't always the key decision makers on the thing that needs to be done to adopt a brand new technology. So like I said, there's a lot of internal stakeholder management, executive engagement, business sign off to get these things into production. So it's very easy to do the proofs of concept and engage the innovation labs and demonstrate and experiment and discover. That last mile, which is actually the last 100 miles, it's the hardest part, that path to production, requires a lot of other skills, a lot of other, people that need to be lined up to sign off. And, this is in a world where businesses, these big corporations, have different strategies and different agendas and different priorities. And it's very easy for these sorts of projects to get lost or waylaid or deprioritized. One of the things I think that needs to be done is greater support to our council member reps internally to drive through that internal those internal hurdles. In addition to a greater level of focus on those core pillars of functionality that Mance was talking about. One of the things that I love about Hedera is its breadth in terms of the services it provides, that you could build anything you like on Hedera. And we've seen examples of far greater use cases than on any other chain because of that. But also it's quite challenging then to really focus in on what's the first use case? What's the problem to be solved? What's the thing that really engages those council member executive teams in order to fully adopt that technology within their business strategically, to create value, to generate revenue, to make money. And those are not technical questions. Those are how does this fit into my business, and how am I going to leverage it to be better, to be a better business? And so those are all the things I think that are necessary, some of the problems to be solved. But in doing that, we're in a far different place than we were even 2 years ago. The studios, the products that are being not only released, Stablecoin Studio, Asset Tokenization Studio, we've got an AI studio now, we've got the Guardian. So all of these products are becoming more refined. They're being tested through proofs of concept. They're being adopted by some of the council members. And that helps as well, because, a lighthouse starts with a bulb, right? And these are the bulbs, So when you can see the light, then you can build a lighthouse around it. And, I just made that analogy up, but it kind of works. So that's where we are, right? So we've got all the building blocks. We've got actually our new rash of council members are super enthusiastic. I'm really impressed with how much they're kind of really leaning in to building on Hedera. And that's testament, I think, to the MEMCOM process and the way that we've kind of helped them understand the benefits. And now they're here, they fully Kool-Aid it up, right? But they don't know where to go. And that's the key thing here. The coordination across the ecosystem partners that, Mance is setting out in his vision is where they go. So as a new council member, right, how do I get on with my project? Oh, so, the foundation does this and THA does that. And, the committee structures provide the governance, and all of those things start coming together in a way where it's, we're greater than the sum of the parts. As a leader within one of those projects, or one of those council members under Project Acacia, I've been very lucky because I've had the inside track, right? So I've been on the leadership team. I know Hedera very, very well, both technically and organizationally, and I've been able to navigate. It wasn't easy bringing Project Acacia or bringing Hedera to a big, high-profile national project like that, and I was only able to achieve that through sort of coordination and navigation and leverage and, really, really leaning into it. And now we need to do that times 30, right? But I think it's doable. I mean, I really do. And, Mance's leadership is really essential for that.
And I think there was a healthy dose of unrelenting will on your part there, Rob, to make sure you saw that one through. And for anybody that doesn't know, this is why I wear those huge headphones. I keep fumbling around with my earbuds. My ears just don't want to hold on to them. But Rob, back on point here, you're pretty much going to be the tip of the spear when it comes to this, considering you are the head of USCOM, getting these council members everything they need to make sure they actually make it to production. Do you want to tease out or elaborate at all on what your strategy is going to be?
Well, I mean, USCOM isn't just about the council members. I try to make USCOM about inspiring council members, Right. So what we do is we showcase projects both by other council members and outside, which may, be related or adjacent to those things that I know would be good for the council members. I get a lot of feedback from council members. USCOM is the most attended of our committees, which is great. It's it's a fun place to be. But we have core objectives within USCOM, and that's ecosystem integrations, which are really important. So, tracking the progress of things like wallets and stablecoin issuance and bridges. And one of the great things about the foundation over the last year or so is that how they've really changed the landscape in terms of Hedera integrations into the wider Web3 space. So that's now kind of working really well. And the reason that's in USCOM is that projects don't exist in isolation. They need to know that there's liquidity coming from here, or there's a bridge there, or what wallets to use, whether it's custodial or self-custodied. So all of that is really important, and we kind of get a great update from the foundation largely about how that's progressing. The second thing that we do is we're looking at network utilization from the perspective of metrics. The trifecta of OG metrics in terms of TPS and TVL and accounts, active accounts are still there, but we're expanding that around other telemetry that we're now able to access across all sorts of different angles, and that helps as well. That helps us look into where the best utility is and the best and how the utilization of the network is going, so we can recommend as a committee to the governing council where things need to change. And then the third and fourth things are kind of the same, but the third is project updates. So we do look at enterprise projects, council projects in particular. We're getting reports from both Foundation and THA on that. That gives us the opportunity to look at themes. That gives us the opportunity to consider the different architectures that may have been, for the same use case or similar use cases where different architectures have been chosen, and work out why that has been the case. Often it's, legitimate, or it could be access to resources, or it could be, related to something outside of this project, but, is necessary for adoption within that business. And then the fourth is showcasing those projects as well. So, we have a great attendance at our showcases, all of which is recorded, so everyone gets to see it. Time zones are problematic. Because we do all that, and we only do it once a month, or twice a month sometimes, then the feedback back into the system, back into the delivery organizations is necessary. And I think this part of this new initiative is about how that happens, how we get all of those great lessons back into the discovery and design and then delivery, with a view specifically on production outcomes and creation of value for the network and for the council members. So there's this feedback loop now that I think, USCOM needs to put in place in order to achieve these goals. So that's what myself and Frank and Zhang, the other committee members, will be looking at as we go forward under this new leadership.
Excellent. Well, again, Rob, really well covered. You did have that last council meeting, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot to come out during the next town hall. But is there anything you want to pass on right now?
Well, I love the idea about the town halls coming back. Actually, what people probably don't know is that you and I talked about this when we started Shark Bites, nearly 3 years ago now.
Exactly.
As a gap, right? Mm-hmm. It's because the OGs loved the town halls, and because the town halls were no longer running, we felt that there may be, in a very small way. Of course, I'm not a founder, and I only have a particular perspective, but it filled that gap. So I'm very, very excited that the town halls are going to recommence. I'm not sure how that's going to be structured. I think Mance is very keen to replay a lot of what's discussed in the council meetings through the town hall. So there's a kind of a greater level of transparency there, which I'm all for. And maybe there'll be some founder AMA again, which is always fun. What that means for Shark Bites, I don't know, but I'm sure we can course correct going forward.
Well, that's right. We were filling a gap and that we thought was needed to make sure we had that interaction from somebody fairly high up in the Hedera ecosystem with the rest of the people out there that are just curious about things. We were answering questions. Now, a lot of that is going to be done with the town halls now. But what I'm looking forward to, Rob, is maybe we won't have as many conversations, or they might not be as long, but we're going to be able to talk about the things that you're working on and the things that you're interested in going forward. So either way, I appreciate all your work in the past few years. Thank you again for coming on here today, and we'll see it maybe next week, maybe the week after.
Whenever I'm needed, I'll pop up.
That works, Rob. Thanks again.
Cheers, Brandon.
So as we mentioned there at the end, we might see some changes in the format around Shark Bites, but I have no doubt that Rob is going to continue to make regular appearances on the show. And of course, we appreciate every single time he comes on. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is around Hiero. Hiero is the first program to graduate from the Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust Program. Now, as we've mentioned, the Hiero project manages Hedera's open source code, the Hashgraph. Hiero graduating from this program is important for a few reasons. First, it means that there is neutral governance with diverse community involvement. Shout out to Brandon D., Milan, and Michael Cantor. Second, it means the code is considered production ready for enterprise-grade deployments. And it also indicates that security and adoption requirements have been met. Since launching just under a year ago, Hiero has grown really quickly with nearly 800 contributors across 80 organizations and with over 50 adopters. And finally, before we move on, I want to give a huge hat tip to All in Crypto for their great coverage of the Hedera ecosystem. They had a couple things that caught my eye this week. The first one was covering NASA involvement in a Hedera project that we covered a while back. Hashwise is a great project, and we definitely needed that reminder. And here's a quick clip explaining exactly what they're doing with their solution. Can you tell us a little bit more about the pretty impressive name that you're working with on this project and why they are interested?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were fortunate enough to become a vendor for NASA, and they basically put out a request that they wanted to start using blockchain for digital transformation within a couple areas within what NASA does. One being model-based systems engineering, the other being space mission management. And as we got into the project with NASA, they kind of honed us into a specific problem that they have in the way that they manage projects. So they bring in other institutions to work on a project, say like a satellite. And all these different institutions are using some form of model-based systems engineering. They don't all do it the same way. They all use different software and different models, but they're all using it to get to the end goal of developing that component that they're responsible for on the satellite. Excuse me. And somebody at NASA, what we call the principal investigators in the middle, trying to bring all that information together. Well, they still do this on an Excel file. And so on that Excel file, you can have information being put in there, and it can be, usually it's correct, but if there's any minor errors, whether it's somebody fat fingered a number or left out a decimal, or they changed a component from copper wiring to aluminum wiring, that can change many things down the line in the whole system. So it's because it's a system of systems. And so the things that the NASA is concerned about are mass, volume, and power on all these systems, because all that adds up and ultimately results in a particular cost, time, and risk and performance for that project. And so our whole goal was to help solve a problem that they had, a pain point that they had, and that was to eliminate errors in this collection of bringing information in from all the model-based systems engineering processes that they were pulling together. And so that ultimately was the goal, to get to the why behind the truth.
Sure. So you have all these components, all these that go into, we'll say a satellite or something along those lines, and they're always updating what the components are because they're making different decisions. And what Hashwise will do using Hedera will add trust to that by giving that metadata for each change that's made. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, and so the goal was to actually even detect changes within a document. So let's say you have, everyone's contributing through an Excel file, and it's all being emailed to this person in the middle, right? And they got to make sure they have the right version. And if it was not the right version, hopefully using Hashwise, it would help detect some of those changes, and then it would require a response from the user to input additional information so they would know, okay, yeah, I changed that number because of XYZ, or I changed that component because of XYZ. And so it's more of a way of collecting the motivation or the reason, whether it was a mistake, an omission, a substitute, or an error within that document, and then making a clearer picture. Because ultimately, this one document that's managing all the other institutions and their model-based systems engineering process becomes a proposal, which becomes something they also use for the life cycle of the project. And some of those errors have caused $250 million projects to fall offline because they had too many errors in them. So it's a solution that solves many headaches, many frustrations within NASA, and helps keep multi-billion-dollar projects moving forward.
All in Crypto also put out a piece describing Google Cloud's new Layer 1. Now, it's only in testnet right now, but it's going to be called Universal Ledger. They also raised an important question as to whether this is going to be a collaborator or a competitor to Hedera. The truth is, we don't really know yet, but there's plenty of large entities who are launching their own networks, including Coinbase, Circle, Stripe, and Robinhood. Now, MasterCard attempted something similar with MasterCard Provenance, which was sunsetted, allowing most of its business to move to Hedera. Now, I'm not sure if this is a concerning trend or not, these big entities spinning up their own networks, but the vibes I'm getting from it is kind of like the intranets of the early days of the internet, where we had the so-called walled gardens, and of course, those didn't work out very well. I still think that open networks like Hedera are probably the best way to go, and regardless if these networks do have some success, I think there's going to be plenty of business out there for entities like Hedera. I actually think this is a great question for Rob. I think he'd love to weigh in on this one. So maybe the next time we have him on, we'll ask him about it. But in the meantime, let's jump into some network analysis. There's been no real change in network throughput, which is still below 10 transactions per second. There's still below a 2.5 second time to consensus finality, about $2,000 in daily network revenue, and between 400 and 600 hourly active users. Nearly all of those users are coming from retail accounts, and we also had about 50,000 accounts created this week. Moving over to the crypto and HBAR markets, I'm not going to lie, it's been a rough week. Bitcoin is down 4% on the day and 8% on the week to $108,000. This is the lowest point Bitcoin's been at in nearly 2 months. HBAR is in line with much of the altcoin complex and is down 5% on the day and 11% on the week to 22.5 cents. We're still in that 22 to 30 cent range we've been talking about for the past few weeks, albeit the lower edge of it. Still, to me, it looks like we're forming a large bull flag, but this could change if we don't hold 22 cents. For now, I remain positive on the fall, barring an unforeseen risk-off event. So I have a couple things that I didn't cover this week. Number one, the DeFi platform Orbit, which I covered a few weeks ago, they've gone live on mainnet. We'll cover that more next week. I also had some recording around the acquisition of At a Bridge by Hashgraph. Now, that's a great combination, but I was actually covering it as if they had acquired At a Swap, the DEX aggregator, and it's actually just the bridge that was acquired. So again, we'll get into more of that next week. Looking forward to next week. I am planning on doing a DeFi corner with Brady on Sunday if I can get a hold of him. I'm also planning on doing kind of a live DeFi corner in the form of an X Space next Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern. We're still working on the details around that as well. And then I have several interviews that I have lined up. One is around our NFT space. Another one is around one of the big four. So that should be a really interesting one. And I might get Rob on to talk about some things as well. But that's all we have for this week. We'll see you next time.